All right, good morning everybody and welcome to January of 1945 and our second kick at the cat at rolling the end dice, and it was successful. I guess you could depend who wants it to be successful, but it was successful for the Allies, or sorry, the Axis, and we ended up pulling off a victory for Table Nagumo. We had to roll, I think, a 4 or less, and we rolled a 3. And that is it. The game is over, concluding the end of the 2024 Sky Marshal Cup. And I'm going to do a video summarizing everything and the weekend a little bit later. But this one, I just want to get the final summary video of what happened in 1945. And quite simply, we can start west, going east. The Americans at that point had lost their navy thanks to the Italians, and their army, stranded in the Middle East, had nowhere else to go except, well, east. So they tried to make a move onto Calcutta, but by then there would be a fortress completed, as well as a lot more infantry or anything down there for big hitters. So ultimately that was going to probably stay in Axis hands. But the British, however, still had a very powerful navy. They had Force Z here, Force K, each with battleships, each with support vessels, and of course this large force with an under battleship and light carrier was off the coast of the Straits of Gibraltar, and they just kept things in check. The remaining Italian fleet was able to take back Cyprus and also make sure that certain areas that were a victory point for the Axis, specifically the Italians, stayed in those hands. And ultimately, the Italians railed up a few units into France on their rail movements. The Richelieu was heavily damaged, and this transport would have been probably wiped out next turn, trying to do an attack, which I believe did fail. And of course, the Italians took any territory back. The Italians were starting to move back into North Africa, taking back territory from the Vichy. But ultimately, that's what happened there. We won the Spanish Civil War just at the end. We were able to, the tide turned when the Republicans had 10 or 15 losses when they attacked, and the Nationalists only had 5. So that really evened up the odds, and then the Republicans started, the Nationalists started getting funding from the Germans and the Italians again to resolve the war. And these were supposed to be medium tanks, but there was 5 medium tanks in Spain at the end of this. And of course, we would have just have to hold it next turn and relocate everything into Madrid against a possible American attack or British attack, but I don't know how successful that would have been or if that would have happened before the game would have ended. So that kind of secured us another point. In Africa itself, the Italians still had a strong hold on East Africa and put a lot of pressure on the French. Eventually, they might have ended, but the Italians were busy trying to protect their victory points, as indeed they should, especially here in Africa and in the Mediterranean. The Germans were able to activate Turkey, move up into Transcaucasia by activating move into Transcaucasia and activated Turkey. And put a lot of pressure up here. And of course, the Russians started heading south, but then they realized they had a big monster army coming up through the Eastern Front there. And consequently, those forces, you can see under the red tags there, Army Group C, Army Group B, are still there. They're actually right over there. We'll go over there just so you can see the full impact of what a great battle was going to be. And a lot of stuff was chipped up. And then, of course, here's our Russian stuff, which is considerable too. And of course, they had this and this defending these 2 cities towards the end. But they did roll this battle out between these 2 great stacks, and Germany did win in the end. I think just by a few, which was awesome, but nonetheless really cool. Italy took Smolensk, took a few territories up here, blitzed into a few open territories since they could go after Russia, which was nice. But trying to hold and take 3 cities for Lebensraum is really, really difficult in this game, which tries to help and show the balance of the game itself, right? But I was just really impressed that Italy was able to get their 2 victory points. Germany did get their Spanish victory point, or Germany and Italy. But Italy was the only country that was able to seize and get both of their victory points. But let's move on eastward here. A great battle ensued up here in northern Siberia, where the Japanese army, this first army, comprised of uno numo, lots of tankos, lots of everything. We brought some troops up, some Marines up wherever we could, and wiped out this army here. On top of that, wiping out a militia over here in Primorsky Krai, consolidating the defense of Manchuria. And had the game went on, obviously the Russian player then would have had to have scrambled more forces over here to protect his interests, which would have helped with the Germans, or let it go and just focus on the vital cities, especially Novosibirsk. And of course, then he would also have to worry about CCP, and of course, not his problem, but the KMT there too, because then Japan would have allocated his forces, probably try to wipe out more on the Asian continent, because those are really the only threats. Well, I shouldn't say that. We still have the Americans in India, but on a defensive stance, I think we would have still been okay, protecting our victory points until the game ended. And then the great battle that never was Japanese ships against American ships. And you can see it looks bigger just with the plates, but Japanese Navy actually was very considerable too, plus extra cruisers right here, plus submarines, other destroyers, other ships on the map, that ultimately the Japanese actually had the advantage. Now, of course, the Americans would be playing catch-up, dropping ships for a follow-up attack, but then once again, the Japanese would do the same thing too if they were victorious. So consequently, that invasion never happened. The American fleet did get to P-17. He did hold his transports back, which was interesting, which means he was just trying to soften up our fleet or get there for the final pounce. But because of Russia being resolved and keeping these nations at bay, Japan probably could have focused its entire income on defense. And also, it was starting to build up, because there was 5 transports in the Pacific, starting to build up its militia capacity at $1 each, plus defense of Tokyo. So it would have been really difficult for the Americans, even if they were victorious. Australia still stayed alive. They were building transports, obviously, that last turn to try to take these victory points away from us. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, the noose could have been tightening on a few victory points. But ultimately, our technologies, Russia did, I think, fairly well for their technology. Pretty much getting almost anything they wanted by the end. The Americans and British, I would say, also did fairly well. And I think the Axis overall, not too bad as well. Japan completing 4 technologies, improved construction, heavy armor, long-range aircraft, and advanced submarines, with a few more up in the wings. Our total income, you can see down here, I'm not counting bonuses, but at the end of the day, the Germans had 63, the Japanese had 59, plus bonuses puts us well, and I think even with the Italians, we were collecting probably more than any other nation by the time you added this, especially with the Allies dropping down here. Of course, the Far East Command did come back as a resurgence when the Americans liberated them. And then the Soviets' income, obviously they got up to their full income, but then they lost a lot when Germany invaded. So very, very, very well planned out attacks by Madman Dan, my partner. And definitely this victory goes to him, and I was just his support staff. But I'm really happy with how Japan turned out for me with Dan's advice. And I definitely learned a lot, because I'm always a romantic about building carriers or doing this or doing something differently. But I learned if you have restraint and look at this from an economic and logistic factor, well, the game can be yours, with maybe even a dash of luck on your side. Over here, looking at the victory points, the Soviets walked away with 5. Winter War, Soviet technology supremacy, and rapid industrialization. The Americans had these 3. They probably could have gotten this one back too, and then this one, and they would have had a total of 6. The Axis, obviously we had Berlin, Tokyo, Rome. We were able to hold on to Paris, Nanking, and Calcutta, the 2 Japanese ones there, and Japan was able to hold on Asia for Asians in the south, and access to resources with Manchuria and the Dutch East Islands. The other two are difficult to get. Not impossible, but very difficult, and so we weren't really counting them. We were fortunate to hold on to these, especially after destroying the American fleet, which was vital when the Italians did that. And Festung Europa in the Spanish Civil War. Festung Europa was also a tough one because they can just land anywhere and attack. But of course, when you have your defense in Paris and you got an air base and you got all that good stuff there for scrambling, you know, it makes it tougher on the Allies. And I don't think the Allies were quite ready to do that, especially not knowing if the end was nigh. So all in all, very happy with that. Gave away a lot of our stuff, prizes, handed out the medals, peer awards. Like I say, we'll probably do that all in a separate video and what all was done. But yeah, no, very happy with everything in the 2024 Sky Marshal Cup. And the game is ended, and I'll do a summary video of everything, you know, probably a little bit later after I've digested a very long weekend. So Sky Marshal in the Eagle's Nest signing out, and thanks again for everyone attending, and hope to see you guys next year.